appeared in several leading academic journals and edited volumes like the New York Times, International Herald Tribune, the Wall Street Journal, Foreign Policy, Christian Science Monitor, and The Hill and the major dailies internationally. Today, he's talking on the topic of talk on Sindh Transogia connections in the late 18th and early 19th century. Let us welcome Dr. Waleed Ziad.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Thank you very much. It is indeed an honor to be invited here in front of such an illustrious audience and in a place which has been very dear to my heart for as long as I can remember. Thatta and Makli are indeed my inroads into the world of Central Asia. Today I will address the Sindh Central Asia nexus of the 18th and 19th centuries, illustrated through the interconnected stories of two Sufis affiliated with a Naqshbandi order of Kabul. Makhdoom Ibrahim Thatwi, our very own, one of Thatta's foremost luminaries, and Bibi Sahiba Kalan, Qadislahu Saraha, apologies, a celebrated female saint and alim, at once Kandahari, Kabuli, and Peshawari, whose life, work, and journey linked Sindh to Central Asia, or Mawara Nahar. This forms part of my broader research on Naqshbandi Mujaddidi networks based on fieldwork, as you just heard, in Afghanistan, Uzbekistan, and Pakistan. These case studies challenge certain ingrained historiographical assumptions, primarily the understanding of Sindh as an isolated cultural and academic zone from the broader Persianate world after the Tarkhan and the Mughal periods. This has, of course, been reinforced by Alexander Burns and Burton's far too ubiquitous narratives. Also, from the perspective of gender studies, the implications of Bibi Sahiba Kalan's story are vast, but I'll only have time to touch upon the very surface. We witnessed through Bibi Sahiba the existence of a potent form of female scholastic, spiritual, religious authority, which emerged in this geographical belt from Sindh to Central Asia. In fact, almost 80 pages of my current monograph are dedicated just to the theological and the practical underpinnings of this new mode of female authority. I'll use the term scholar Sufi quite often. Why? As many of us will know, the worlds of the ulama and the mutasawwifin are not just overlapping, but essentially it is the same scholastic academic domain. Where the madrasa secondary education leaves off is where the khanaqahi education begins. Now, as a prelude, there are 5 processes important to note, which, again, most of us should be familiar with. First, already by the late 17th century, Sindh's subedars were becoming more independent of the Mughal Empire. 2, this shift gradually yielded a literary efflorescence and a translation movement, for the most part situated in Thatta, but also other towns were emerging like Matiari, Nasarpur, Hala, and Hyderabad, or I should say re-emerging in many cases. 3, in the course of the 18th century, Thatta and Lari Bandar, as we have now heard, were being gradually replaced by Bandar-e Karachi, and Thatta's scholastic apparatus was shifting to some of the northern towns. And, most important, Sindh continued to be a lifeline, as you can see on this map, which connected a lifeline to both Multan and Kandahar, and onwards to Bukhara, to Yarkand in China. Hajj caravans would undoubtedly travel through Lower Sindh. Now, much of this process has to do with the establishment of the Durrani Empire in the mid-18th century, and the shifting of political and economic centers westward from the Mughal heartlands, which is the subject of Yas Gauman's work, towards Kabul, Kandahar, Peshawar. It is, after all, under Durrani patronage that the Shikarpuri merchant networks expanded as far as St. Petersburg and Xinjiang. Number 5, there is a scholastic reorientation. Since the Tarkhan and the early Mughal periods, the direct contacts between Central Asia and Sindh were gradually reduced. What does this mean? This means there's less movement of scholars and Sufis from Sindh to Balkh, Bukhara, Farghana, or Kashgar, and less silsilas from Central Asia, which assigned khulafa and disciples directly in Sindh. Instead, in the case of the Naqshbandi Mujaddidi silsila, which is one of the primary silsilas in this region, the following happens. With Sheikh Ahmad Sirhindi, as we heard from Dr. Siddiqui, the center of the Naqshbandi order shifts from Central Asia into Sirhind, between Lahore and Delhi, with Khalifas appointed as far as Istanbul and China and Bengal. Then, with the crisis of the Mughal Empire, alluded to by Dr. Rajani, in the mid-18th century, Nadir Shah's occupation, of course, impacted Sindh, and then Ahmad Shah Abdali comes to the fore. Many of the Sufis at this stage move into the Durrani Empire, that is in Kabul, Kashmir, Punjab, Kandahar. So the Afghan heartlands become the new centers of the Naqshbandi Mujaddidi silsila. These migrant silsilas then develop their own links with other areas beyond the Durrani Empire. From Peshawar and Kabul, Khalifas are dispatched from Sindh to literally Siberia, where few of you may know that the Sufi efflorescence of Siberia was actually mediated through a Khanaqah in Peshawar. So these Durrani regions mediate and create scholastic pollination between Central Asia and, in this case, Kandahar, Kalat, and Sindh. Now we turn to our protagonists, Makhdoom Ibrahim Tatvi and Bibi Sahiba Kalan. We'll begin with their Sufi pir, Khwaja Safiullah Sirhindi. In the 18th century, he was undoubtedly the most renowned Sufi scholar of the Durrani Empire. He had migrated to Kabul with the Sikh invasion, and he set up a college there, a madrasa and a khanaqah, in the 1770s at Shor Bazar, which is in the heart of the city, which drew students from as far afield as Balochistan and Sindh. He had won the respect of two kings, the son and the grandson of Ahmad Shah Abdali, who is Temur Shah and Shah Zaman, or Zaman Shah Durrani. Suffice it to say, in 1793, the Afghan king, Zaman Shah, had walked on foot from Kabul's royal citadel to the alleyways of Shor Bazar so that Khwaja Safiullah would tie his coronation turban. Now, Khwaja Safiullah had traveled to Sindh 3 times in the course of Hajj during his life, and according to tradition, received a spiritual invitation from Lal Shahbaz Qalandar himself, and later performed muraqabah at Bhitsha in some hagiographies, coming down to now where we now stand in Thatta and Makli. In other words, he embraced Sindh's sacred landscape. Some of Sindh's foremost scholars became his disciples. Now, Khwaja Safiullah had appointed over 30 deputies, 9 of whom were from Sindh. It's 9 out of over 30, to manage his sacred scholastic network, which extended beyond the Amu Darya, the Oxus, to the Kabul highlands, amongst 5 Pakhtun tribes, and to Balochistan and the Indian Ocean. These included the celebrated Sufi Makhdoom Ibrahim Tatvi. Now, Makhdoom Ibrahim, who passed away in 1810, became the most effective mediator in establishing Khwaja Safiullah's network from Sindh to Rajasthan. He effectively merged the scholastic tradition of his grandfather, Makhdoom Hashim, with the specific Kabuli Naqshbandi Mujaddidi esoteric teachings propounded by his teacher, Khwaja Safiullah. Now, Makhdoom Ibrahim was the product of 2 towering Zahiri ulama lineages of Sindh, both associated with the Naqshbandi Mujaddidi silsila. His father was Makhdoom Abdul Latif, the son of Makhdoom Hashim, and his mother was the granddaughter of Makhdoom Abul Qasim. His family had been closely associated with the Kalhoro ruling elite, Makhdoom Hashim, of course, being the chief Qazi here, and his son Abdul Latif being the Qazi Askar, the chief military Qazi of the Kalhoros. And Makhdoom Abdul Latif also administered a madrasa here, which he then passed on to his son when he was on military duty. Now, Makhdoom Ibrahim initially met Khwaja Safiullah on his first Hajj journey. In the hagiographies, the Tazkireh, the relationship is rendered according to the Rumi Shams Tabriz trope. The former was the accomplished worldly scholar, the latter the realized spiritual guide. After his initiation, his bayt, Makhdoom Ibrahim traveled from Thatta to Kabul, hoping to study directly under his pir. Although he was already a well-regarded theologian, Khwaja Safiullah assigned him to work in the horse stables at the Shor Bazar Khaneka. Makhdoom Ibrahim was nonplussed, especially since Khwaja Safiullah continuously ignored him thereafter. The situation went on for 4 months, until Makhdoom Ibrahim, in his frustration, came to the conclusion that there's nothing more for him in this Khaneka but food. At this stage, all of his exoteric knowledge was stripped away from him. The story goes that for over 40 days he stayed in this state, vexed and despondent. Then, while performing late-night supplications, he heard Khwaja Safiullah's voice. "We invited you. Who are you to claim that you came here of your own account?" The Pir explained to Makhdoom Ibrahim that his knowledge was tainted with arrogance, and that through his trials he had been cleansed in the rivers of paradise. His mental faculties returned, and he was sent back to Sindh in 1780 to instruct people on the Naqshbandi Mujaddidi path. Now, Khwaja Safiullah's order became his primary affiliation, and he himself is said to have initiated 200,000 disciples. There are some, of course, hagiographic liberties here. And all of these disciples' spiritual allegiances were now reoriented from this region into Kabul. Now, Makhdoom Ibrahim's writings reflected the exoteric and esoteric devotional traditions that he had inherited from his grandfather and from Khwaja Safiullah. These works range from treatises, from in fact poetry in Arabic in honor of his pir, a treatise on meditative practices, to questions of ritual, even some on mundane subjects like the prohibition of tobacco. There's one Sindhi tract he composed which is quite important, Hidayat al-Murideen, which served as a guide for disciples to learn Naqshbandi Sufi adab and the spiritual science of the subtle centers of the human body and the human spiritual reality. It was deemed useful enough that in 1873 it was reproduced in Sindhi, but in Bombay in lithograph form by a qazi from Gujarat for distribution in Sindh. Another of Ibrahim's close associates, Makhdoom Abdul Wahid Sivistani, was appointed also as Khalifa by Khwaja Safiullah. He was unquestionably the most influential jurist of his time in Lower Sindh. His most famous of his 30 works is the Beaz-e-Wahidi, which is in Arabic, Persian, and Sindhi. It's a 3-volume collection of fatwas, which resides in almost, or used to reside in almost every historical madrasa in this region and beyond. Haji Ibrahim Tatwi's close associate was Bibi Sahiba Kalan, another Khalifa and a niece of Khwaja Safiullah. Of all of Khwaja Safiullah's khulafa, she was designated as, quote, the first and the most perfect. She was born either in Peshawar or in Delhi in about 1752, and she hailed from a great scholarly saintly lineage. From one side, a Sayyid, a direct descendant of Makhdoom Jahaniyan, Jahan Gasht of Uch Sharif, and from another side to Sheikh Ahmad Sirhindi. So Sindh and Multan sacred geography mapped onto the Naqshbandi Mujaddidi sacred geography. At an early age, she memorized the Quran, studied jurisprudence, theology, and medicine, and before the age of 11, even began her training in metaphysics and mysticism. By the 1770s, she arrived in Kabul and Kandahar, and at this stage, she was already a promising young scholar in her 20s. Over the next 2 decades, she educated hundreds of scholars and Sufis. She was financially independent and had inherited land around Kandahar, which the local Durrani Sardars had granted to her family for their scholastic endeavors. So in her capacity as Khalifa, she was assigned to teach both women and men within the order, maintaining a strict parda throughout. And based on oral narratives, we can glean that she would have directed women's dhikr, imparted basic literacy also to elite Sayyid women, as well as to other classes, provided courses on hadith, doctrine, fiqh, jurisprudence, and Sufism to more advanced students, and administered medical and spiritual remedies for physical ailments. Biographies also suggest that she administered a parallel sacred scholastic space in the Khaniqahs, the Haram Sarai. I do a fair amount of work on the nature and structure of this space, as well as its finances. We can assume that there was a separate waqf, an endowment for the maintenance of the women's quarter and the Haram Sarai, and it had its own parallel system of food and alms distribution to the poor, which attracted both Muslim and Hindu mendicants. In 1797, Bibi Sahiba joined her teacher and over 300 companions for a historic Hajj voyage through Kandahar, Kalats, and Sindh, taking her from Karachi to Yemen and beyond. She was accompanied by her daughter, Bibi Sahiba Asani, Bibi Sahiba II as she's known, who was a young alima and a Sufi in her own right, as well as her 2 sons, the elder of whom chronicled in great detail the events of the physical and the spiritual journey. En route, somewhere around Thatta, Makhdoom Ibrahim Thatwi joined the caravan. These 2 now were the principal Khalifas in this caravan. Within the Haramain, upon completing the Hajj rites, Khwaja Safiullah issued Bibi Sahiba's diploma, indicating that she had mastered the Sharia and designating her as the Qayyum and as the Qutb, the greatest saint of her age, and assigning all of his thousands of disciples, male and female, to her charge. At the end of this document, her teacher writes the following, although now the respected aforementioned Makhduma has no need of permission, but since it is a tradition of our predecessors that without permission a pir cannot in this serious matter take a single step, thus, in written form, it is enshrined that whosoever from all women and men that seek the path of transcendent God can come to her service and take the path from her, even if they have received it from this poverty-stricken one. This is referring to himself, Khwaja Safiullah. Essentially, she became his successor, and then Makhdoom Ibrahim Thatwi's own khulafa, like his very dear companion, the poet saint of this land, Ahmad Nizamani, would later visit Bibi Sahiba at Kandahar for spiritual training and sohbat. Very soon after, on her return journey, when they had reached Yemen, Khwaja Safiullah fell ill unexpectedly and passed away. The spiritual and financial affairs of the Hajj caravan fell to Bibi Sahiba, while Makhdoom Ibrahim led the funeral procession and the prayers. Bibi Sahiba, with her own finances, commissioned the shrine in Yemen, and then led the whole caravan back to the Haramain for a second Hajj, during which, as related by her son, she reached her own spiritual heights. Now, on her return journey through Sindh, her daughter also fell ill and died at Matyari, which the locals believe is second only in its spiritual importance to Makli, which is a medieval town on the Indus River. According to popular narratives, the body was placed on the back of a camel, which was to decide the appropriate burial place, mirroring the prophetic trope at Medina. The camel stopped in the lands of the Musa Pota Sayyids. We are told that Bibi Sahiba entered into meditation, muraqabah, and received insights that Matyari is the Chaukat of Medina, which is why it is said occasionally to house the second largest necropolis after Makli. As was tradition, the Musa Pota Sayyids hosted the caravan and provided them with land and property. Here, Bibi Sahiba commissioned a shrine for her daughter, following the Talpur architectural conventions, and an adjacent scholastic institution was made in Bibi Sahiba II's honor, which remains a local sacred site. 2 centuries later, this Hajj is still remembered by the locals. Bibi Sahiba then returned back to Kandahar and Kabul, and she stayed there for several years and then went to her ancestral homeland of Sirhind, and then through Lahore returned. A year later, she was invited to Bukhara by the king of Bukhara himself, Amir Haydar, who at the time was a practicing Naqshbandi Mujaddidi Sufi, and not just a disciple, but he had ijazahs to teach his own students. Bibi Sahiba's 2 sons accompanied her, and they participated in scholastic debates in the Bukharan court, and she regularly visited the shrine of Khwaja Bahauddin Naqshband, who it appears she developed an intimate spiritual connection with. She then left Bukhara with her sons, and on the way home in 1803, she died at Mazar-e-Sharif, which is the spiritual epicenter of Central Asia, built around the legendary shrine attributed to Imam Ali. With Bibi Sahiba's exalted trans-regional reputation, the custodians of the shrine accorded her the funeral of a great saint. She was given, in fact, the rare honor of being buried under the second dome of Imam Ali's shrine complex in Mazar-e-Sharif. Her sons continued the journey home. The elder Shah Fazlullah was to become a noteworthy poet and a writer, and the progenitor of one of Kandahar and later Sindh's important spiritual lineages. The younger Shah Ziaul Haq became a scholar and saint of the Kabul highlands, and many of his descendants also moved down here to Lower Sindh. At this time, a new form of spiritual authority developed in Sindh, mediated through Bibi Sahiba and many other women, Sufis. I'll make this very brief, and I'll mention 2 of the suborders of Bibi Sahiba's lineage in Umarkot, which will exemplify how this model of women's authority took root here. Bibi Sahiba's grandson appointed as his spiritual deputy a great ascetic saint, Bibi Mitha, a Sayyid of the Khuraro clan, and she is said to have had the Ruhani Ghalba of all of Umarkot. She was eventually gifted large amounts of land for an institutional network. Another disciple at Umarkot, Miu Jan Muhammad, passed his order down to 3 generations of women, and just recently, in the last generation, the mantle was inherited by a man. So for our purposes, there are several conclusions to draw from this case study. First, through Bibi Sahiba Kalan and Makhdoom Ibrahim's life stories and their constant repetition and performance, the sacred landscape of Sindh, including Thatta, Makli, Matiari, become tied to Kandahar, Kabul, Bukhara, and Mazar-e-Sharif. Places like Matiari become permanent way stations for scholars and Sufis moving down through Central Asia. Suffice it to say that one of the oldest Qazi families in Thatta today, which traces its lineage to the Tarkhan period, is linked with the Afghan Naqshbandi Mujaddidis, who actually moved from Kabul to Kandahar and then later on to Matiari and beyond. The last word I will say, and I apologize for taking up so much of your time, is that in the context of conserving, developing, and studying Makli, it is vital to head back to this array of sources, be it waqfnamas, hagiographies, biographies, travel accounts, to actually understand, as the previous presenter highlighted, how these are not stagnant but living spaces. We need to understand how these spaces were actually lived. And then to, in fact, hark back to Dr. Siddiqui's presentation and then also to my own, it's important to understand how they existed as part of a sophisticated web of sacred and scholastic spaces that went even far beyond Sindh. Thank you very much.
With Dr. Ghulam Ahmad Lakho's permission, I have only one comment to make, and Ziad, that relates to your talk. We have this great Sufi saint of Sindh by the name of Abdul Rahim Girodi. He's also known as the Nostradamus of Sindh. And he predicted many things. And there's one couplet by him. He says, Jadeh kadeh Sindhdi, tokhe kandharon jokho. Ever and forever, Sindhi, you will be put at task by Kandhar. I did understand this when we had these Talibans infiltrating into this part of the world, but I never understood this sophisticated Sufi infiltration that has unnecessarily controlled the mind and the life of a basic Sindhi. We now understand how Kandhar and Afghanistan has dislodged the sanity and equilibrium of this part of the world. Thank you.
We have the last speaker of the session, Dr. Ghulam Mohammad Lakho, and we cannot forget the contribution, especially as a historian, on various areas of various rulers on Sindh, but especially when we talk about Kalhoda period and the Sama dynasty, he has worked a lot. डॉक्टर लाखो यकीनी तौर पर किसी भी तारुफ के मोहताज नहीं है, बिलखुसूस हम सब इस सरजमीन से ताल्लुक़ रखने वालों के लिए, लेकिन स्पेशली फॉर दोज who are new to this name and especially as an historian of this land, let me share with them that Professor Dr. Ghulam Mohammad Lakho was born on 6 July 1954 in village Mittha Khan Jokhio, district Nawabshah. He got primary, secondary and college education from institutions of his own home district. He received his Master of Arts in English, MA in English in 1980 and MA in History in 1982 from University of Sindh, Jamshoro, Sindh, Pakistan. He joined Education Department, Government of Sindh in 1982, first as lecturer in English and then as lecturer in History. Dr. Lakho served Pakistan Studies Center, University of Sindh as a lecturer from 1987 to 1991. Then he joined Department of General History, University of Sindh, Jamshoro, Sindh, Pakistan in 1991. He did his PhD in 1999 when he was assistant professor in University of Sindh. He retired as professor and chairman of the department on 5th July 2014. Dr. Lakho is author, editor and translator of more than 23 books on history, culture and literature of Sindh. He has written more than 130 research articles in Sindhi, Urdu and English, published in prominent journals on national and international repute. His area of interest is medieval history of India and with special reference to history and cultural heritage of Sindh. Professor Lakho has attended a number of national and international seminars and conferences and symposiums and workshops in and outside the country. Dr. Lakho is associated with numerous literary and historical institutions. Since he is the last speaker, let me request him to speak not more than 20 minutes. The topic of his dissertation, his paper is Jamia Masjid Thatta, Basic Facts and Certain Explanations. He will be talking about Shahjahani Masjid Thatta. Please welcome Professor Dr. Ghulam Mohammad Lakho.
Scholars, professors from abroad and Pakistan, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, I congratulate Syed Sardar Ali Shah, Minister of Culture, Tourism and Antiquities, and Mr. Abdul Hamid Akhund, Secretary, Endowment Fund Trust, Karachi, Mr. Kanasro, and other staff members to have organized international conference on Makli. I am glad to see here some of my old friends like Dr. Rafiq Mughal after 1996 and Dr. Muhammad Mahdi Tawassuli from Iran. Before I come to my topic, there is necessary to mention two scholars, Mir Ali Sher Khan, who wrote Makli Nama in 1174. Other is Pir Hussain Rashdi, who found Makli Nama after 2 centuries exactly in 1374. Pir Sahib edited, wrote comprehensive notes and annotations on Maklinama and got it published in 1967. Because of these two scholars and historians, we are now able to conduct research on Makli. So let us not forget these two giant scholars. Now I come to my topic. Here is also sitting Qazi Ghulam Ali, who is Palki Nashin of this Satta for the last 4 or 5 centuries. My topic is Jame Masjid Thatta or Shahjahan Mosque. Basic facts, certain explanations. When I am listening here various scholars' speeches, talks and papers, I think that dimensional aspects can be found to study Makli. Archaeology, architecture, also environment and tourism. But I am the student of history and I have taken path of history to study the Shahjahan Mosque or Jame Masjid Thatta. First author, Mir Ali Sher on Amir Khanis. Mir Ali Sher Khan made the seminal error as regards origin of Jame Masjid Thatta, who happens to be the first indigenous historian in this regard. As per his opinion, Nawab Amir Khan assumed reign of Thatta in 1037/1627 AD, when Nawab Sharif al-Mulk hosted Prince Shahjahan, who had developed differences with his father and expressed his resentment by getting away from home and coming to Thatta. But Nawab Sharif al-Mulk did not suitably honor Prince Shahjahan. However, when Nawab Amir Khan assumed as governor of Thatta, he awarded punitive punishments to all responsible for inappropriate treatment to Shahjahan, who had by then become an independent, powerful emperor of the subcontinent. Since Nawab Amir Khan enjoyed support and patronage of Emperor Shahjahan, therefore he became powerful, established his own Mawla beside Bhai Khan Mawla, and having demolished a Hindu temple, ordered the construction of a mosque. Still, Mawla and mosque are extant and are famous as Amir Khani Mawla and Amir Khani Mosque. Mir Ali Sher Khan's narrative has multiple gaps, such that the year Nawab Amir Khan was appointed and how long Nawab Amir Khan ruled Thatta, the real history of Mughal Nawabs, or even the foundation of Jame Masjid and who was its founder. Mir Ali Sher has remained silent on all these aspects. In this regard, he has committed some other mistakes. Jame Mosque, a brief introduction. This important mosque is housed at Amir Khani Mawla in Thatta. Its construction commenced in 1054/1644 AD, and the work continued for 4 years till 1057 Hijri/1647 AD. The remaining work was completed by a bureaucrat named Jalal Khan in the ensuing years. The inscriptions and work design patterns of the mosque suggest that the construction work must have taken at least half a century to complete. This entire period belongs to Mughal rule in Sindh, since one inscription of 1057/1647 AD bears the name of King Shah Jahan. Hence, the mosque came to be known by this very name as Shah Jahan Mosque. A.W. Hughes was first writer to mention stonework in different Sindh in 1843. The English scholars started formally focusing on India and also about Sindh. This is how elaborate investigations about Jami Mosque Thatta also commenced. When A.W. Hughes wrote about this mosque at that time, another British official, Mr. S.W. Tyndall, who was Deputy Collector of Jirk, prepared a report about Jami Mosque and submitted it to government. Hence, Archaeology Department published a booklet having title as Archaeological Survey of Western India, number 8, Bombay, 1879. Let us have a look about Khudadad Khan's opinion regarding this mosque, author of the Lubhe Tariq Sindh, the final Persian history of Sindh. Lubhe Tariq Sindh. Khudadad Khan was first official and local historiographer who wrote about Jame Mosque and also followed A.W. Hughes' opinion. Khudadad Khan has committed more mistakes rather than Mir Ali Sher. His book was published 24 years after A.W. Hughes' work. Khudadad Khan narrates, the construction of the mosque was undertaken by Nawab Amir Khan under directives of Emperor Shah Jahan, for which rupees 9 lakhs were paid from imperial treasury. This is written in a few books. He doesn't mention in which books this is written. In addition, the Mohalla Bhai Khan's neighbor mosque was also constructed by Nawab Amir Khan. Besides getting an eye-catching tomb at Makli erected, the descendants of Nawab Amir Khan still live in Thatta and its suburbs. The construction of this mosque began in 1043 AH/1632 AD. Then foundation was laid in 1049/1639 AD. The preliminary phase was completed in 1054 Hijri/1647 AD. As revealed through inscriptions, the entire work came to completion in 1057 Hijri/1650 AD, whereas the remaining necessary phases were finished during Emperor Aurangzeb's days. As per Khudadad Khan's narrative, the construction of mosque continued about 25 years, spanning until 1068